Hi, I'm Jim Zogby, and welcome to Viewpoint. Tonight, I'm going to talk with Osama Monajid and Dima Musa. They're two founding members of the Syrian National Council. We'll talk about recent developments in Syria and the Syrian opposition movement. Then we'll get an analysis of Tuesday's GOP primary debate from Shane DeApril. He's editor of Campaigns and Elections magazine here in Washington. But first, I want to welcome Aaron Snipe. He's spokesperson for the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, career Foreign Service officer who worked with the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Iraq, served as a deputy spokesperson to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Thanks for joining us, Aaron.
Really good to be with you. Thank you.
I want to start, if we could, with the news this week about an alleged assassination attempt directed against the ambassador from Saudi Arabia here to Washington. Let me start this way. I don't put anything past the Iranians. I mean, they've done some pretty horrific things in the world and at home. But this one is a head scratcher, if anything. I mean, you couldn't make up a plot like this and have it be believable. And so some folks are actually starting to say, well, this doesn't add up. I mean, I heard on CNN they had a person who was a expert in the Mexican drug cartel saying, I don't think this is right. I've heard Iranian experts say it doesn't. Talk to me a little about the case as you know it and what we make of it.
Sure. Well, this is a criminal investigation, and but we should note that at the very outset, this was a real victory for U.S. law enforcement and the intelligence community coming together to break up this plot. As President Obama and Secretary Clinton have said, this was a flagrant violation not only of United States law, but of international law as well. The facts of this case are complicated, and as many have said, even in the administration, it sounds like it was coming from a Hollywood novel or a Tom Clancy novel. But if we take a look at the tactics of the Iranian regime for the past 30 plus years, it's not surprising. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, who we believe is at the heart of this plot, have used political assassination and terrorism as a tool for Iran's foreign policy for many, many years. So while the facts do seem odd, we feel very confident in the investigation that the FBI has undertaken, and now we are engaging with leaders from around the region and beyond to increase pressure on the Iranian regime.
Tell me this. I understand it's a criminal investigation, and there's going to be limited information coming out, but what do you know, what can you talk about in terms of how high up this goes, if you have any evidence of it going beyond this obviously strange character in Texas? Sure. Or do we have to wait till the court case?
Well, as the Attorney General noted yesterday, there are communications that were intercepted between the person in question and people in Iran who are known to be affiliated with the IRGC and more specifically the Quds Force. Now, we both know how the IRGC operates in Iran. It's a parastatal organization reporting directly up to the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. So I can't say for sure, and I can't give you specifics as to who in the Iranian regime knew, but we believe with a reasonable amount of certainty that there were people high up in the Iranian regime who at least knew about this plot.
How is it being received by other countries? And I don't mean allies, who obviously will view it one way, but in particular, countries like China, Russia, countries that have whose support will ultimately be needed if any international consensus is to be formed on ratcheting up sanctions, et cetera. How are they receiving this?
Well, it's still early in the investigation, and just over the past 24 hours to 36 hours, the United States has begun briefing our friends and allies around the world. President Obama has made calls, Secretary of State Clinton, Deputy Secretary Burns, and other senior members of the administration are reaching out to their counterparts to brief them on what we can brief them at this stage. But I think there's a general feeling within the international community that this is a very bad thing. You know, this was an assassination plot on a diplomat. And the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran is a signatory to the UN Convention that protects diplomats. And so the idea that Iran, as a state sponsor of terror, would target a serving diplomat is cause for great concern.
So you are convinced that it is Iran, not a rogue element, and not some guy in Texas courting favor?
Well, we believe that the IRGC is at the center of this plot, and the IRGC exists in Iran. So they are the ones who are culpable, and as the investigation goes forward, I'm sure more information will be revealed.
I want to shift to Egypt for a minute. We were shocked by the killings of the Coptic Christians that took place, but a counter story is beginning to emerge coming from the generals, and I've been following in the Egyptian press. The storyline is all over the place, with everything from the foreign elements within the Coptic demonstrators beginning the violence to the fact that the military, on the other end of the continuum, that the military used excessive force, ran over people, shot people, etc. We're having these counter stories. What is the U.S. position, as best you know, what happened, so that we don't end up seeing a situation where it's he said, she said?
No, of course. Well, at the outset, the United States expressed its deep condolences over the lives that were lost in that altercation. And many of us watching around the world saw those images, which were very disturbing.
It's one of these, who do you believe, me or your lying eyes story?
Well, it was certainly cause for great concern. Secretary Clinton reached out to the Egyptian foreign minister, and we've had contact with the Egyptian government. Of course, our ambassador, Ambassador Ann Patterson in Cairo, is in constant touch with Egyptian authorities. Our position at this stage is the SCAF, the Egyptian army, will investigate. They understand that the world is watching. They understand.
Are they the appropriate vehicle to carry out an investigation, or should there not be, or can there be an independent investigation here?
Well, that's going to have to be a decision for the Egyptian people.
Okay.
But I think the military does understand that this is a very tough job. That when the police were disbanded, the military had to take up the role of policing, which is not their traditional function. So they are trying as best to work in this new role during this period of great transition. And it's difficult. Make no mistake, this is very, very difficult. But it's why I think at this stage we need to support the investigation as it takes place and continue to remain in constant touch with the Egyptians and with allies around the region so that these type of events don't take place again.
Because there's a story behind the story here, and that is that there's a historic problem of the Coptic community in Egypt, and the issue of equal citizenship rights, etc., is a backdrop to this. So have there been overtures on that issue made as well?
Well, certainly that is an issue for the Egyptian people to resolve. The goal of the revolution in Egypt was to bring about transformation and change. And that change is not just for the Muslim community, but for Christians and for all of Egypt's citizens. So it's going to be critical in this next period, with the elections coming up, that all parties, all religions, all faiths, everyone is represented in the new Egypt.
And let me get folks out there in the conversation about any of the topics we're talking about tonight. If you want to give us a call, the number from overseas is 001-202-4950. 1-420-5665. If you're calling from here in the U.S., 1-202-420-5730. I want to switch now to Libya.
Sure.
And ask you about some of the problems we're reading about with the transitional government. They seem to have a problem controlling weapons, they seem to have a problem controlling militias, and there's a difficulty over the issue of leadership and a coalescing of leadership. How difficult does this make the transition?
It presents formidable challenges for the transition. But we believe that the Transitional National Council has been a good steward of this process. I mean, let's take a step back for a moment and remember where we were in February of this year, when Gaddafi had vowed to exterminate his people like rats. We saw the international community come together, passing UN Security Council resolutions to protect Libyan citizens. And as the tides began to turn, we saw a Transitional National Council that was very much in the planning mode, in planning stages, thinking about unfreezing assets, ensuring that they could pay salaries, ensuring that the transition would go as smoothly as possible. Now, a transition from the Gaddafi regime to a fully functioning democracy would be tough for anybody. And so we think the Transitional National Council has done a very good job, but there are challenges ahead.
Before I get to some calls that are holding, I want to ask you about Palestine.
Sure.
Frankly, I don't understand the extraordinary effort being made by our government here to block this statehood bid by the Palestinians. I mean, saying you'll veto it is one thing, but sort of putting ourselves out on the line, lobbying as extensively as we are and pressuring as extensively as we are other nations to vote against it, seems almost to hurt the United States more than it does help the peace process. And the President has made the point about the Arab Spring representing this new sort of responsiveness that governments must have to the voice of Arab people.
Sure. And
here we are sort of flying right in the face of that, causing an awful lot of unrest in the Arab world about the United States and its intentions. Is it worth the political capital that's being spent here to block this effort?
Well, we believe it is worth the political capital to get the parties back to the negotiating table. That's really where our focus is. And so I don't think that we are spending all of our political capital trying to tell people to vote this way or vote that way. What we're really doing is spending a lot of energy and capital and effort to get the parties back to the table. Today, Ambassador Hale met with President Mahmoud Abbas in Paris, and we are doing everything that we can because we believe that a negotiated solution will be the only solution that leads to a lasting and durable peace between the parties.
But negotiated solution while settlements continue to be built. Now you have opposed the settlements.
We have.
The most recent announcement.
And we've been very clear.
And yet they continue to be built. And is there any wonder Palestinians don't have confidence in the peace process or confidence in the ability to restrain Israeli behavior when these things continue to occur?
We understand Palestinian frustrations, and that is why President Obama, 1 year ago, and again just recently at the UN General Assembly, called again for his vision of a Palestinian state. Look, you have been studying this issue for many years. I've been working in the Middle East studying this issue for many years. It's a complicated issue, but the United States really believes that the only way that we can find a lasting and durable peace is to have the parties negotiating together.
We could talk about these and many other topics and continue this conversation, but I'm going to let callers in on it. First, let me start in Texas. Caller, your question.
Well, respectfully, I would just like to know how I find the timing of this arrangement rather curious with regards to a Fast and Furious debacle. It just seems to me like this is kind of a wag the dog scenario, and I think people are beginning to tire of these FBI escapades where they sting somebody and get some mental retards and talk them into bombing, and it just seems like entrapment.
that is something we're going to hear about.
Sure, the timing of it.
Thank you for the call. Yeah, the timing of it and the DEA involvement, FBI involvement, smacking of entrapment. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I'm the State Department spokesperson,
Not
so
the
I
Justice Department
can't
spokesman.
speak to that. But
Right.
let me address the gentleman from Texas's question, because I think we should not mix any potential mistakes that a government agency has made with the successes that they had. One of the things that this administration has taken great pains to do is to ensure that our intelligence community and our law enforcement are working together, so that we are not just having people imprisoned and disappearing into the night, that we work very closely to follow the rule of law. So in this case, as the Attorney General noted, this investigation has been going on for months. But we finally charged these individuals, and we thought it best to announce it to the American people, to the international community, because it was such
Was there ever any danger, or was this nipped well before that?
Well, the idea that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps were plotting to assassinate, and your viewers may know, this assassination plot was targeting a restaurant in Washington, D.C., where there would have been dozens of American citizens eating as well. So this was a plot that could have had a very, very
Multiple
destructive.
casualties.
Absolutely.
Sure. Let me go to Maryland for a call. Caller? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, your question.
Yes, I have a question for the brother. I think he's a black man. As a black man in America, I can't understand his reasoning with wanting them to wait. How long did we wait before we got our right to vote and other rights in America? I mean, and he's sitting here hypocritically wanting these people to wait when that was originally their land.
I can testify he is a black man, and he's a government spokesperson, and I'm going to let him answer the question.
Sure. No. From Maryland, thank you very much for your question. Listen, we don't want the Palestinians to wait. This is urgent. This is now. We want a lasting and durable solution. So please don't mistake the idea, don't mistake process for what the ultimate goal that we all agree on is. We believe that there should be a Palestinian state. We also believe that there should be a stable and secure Israel living side by side. It's just a disagreement on how we get there. We know that if one state decides, well, we're just going to declare, that there will never be a lasting peace, which is really what the region wants. And so only through negotiations are we going to see this come
Congress
about.
is threatening to cut aid to Palestinians if they continue on this. Actually, they have passed a resolution to that effect. And they've also now, there's a UN reform bill that if the UN votes on this, they're going to suspend aid to the UN as well. That's pretty unilateral on our part.
Well, here's where we have our civics lesson and talk about the three branches of government. It's our position that aid should continue to the Palestinian Authority. But we're not alone in feeling that way. Many in the Israeli government have also echoed that. It is a source of stability for the Palestinian Authority, and we think that it would go a long way to supporting all of our goals, which are a stable and secure Palestinian state living side by side with Israel. So we've been in close contact with members of Congress on this issue, but Congress will have to make their decision. They're a separate branch of government, but we've made our position known.
Congress ultimately controls the purse strings. Does the president have any flexibility in this regard?
Well, fortunately, we have wonderful relationships with members of Congress. One of the things that we often do when we're posted abroad is host congressional delegations so we can give them a better sense of what's happening on the ground. So in our discussions here in Washington and when congressional delegations head out into the region, they can get a sense of the situation on the ground.
Let me get you in. If there's any other folks out there who want to give us a call, the number is up on the screen. We're talking about a bunch of issues here. I want to stay on Palestine for just a minute.
Sure.
Because the UN vote issue, if it goes to the General Assembly and we end up with a situation like the French proposal, which is an observer state, not a full member state, would that be acceptable to the U.S. government?
Well, we're not there yet. What would be most acceptable to the U.S. government is if we could get the parties back together. I know it sounds as if I am beating a drum with the same message, but that really is the message. A pathway to a viable Palestinian state won't come through New York. It has to be negotiated in Jerusalem and in Ramallah.
Let's go to New York for a call. Caller?
Hi. My question is this. I have been reading comments by numerous specialists in the United States and academics on Iran, and they find this recent revelation that the activity was, they don't see it as legitimate. They have many questions because they say this doesn't fit any kind of prior experience and knowledge that they have about Iran. Could you speak to that?
Okay, thank you.
Sure. But to the caller in New York, look, as I stated earlier in the program, the facts of this plot are strange, but I would disagree. I think that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and elements in the regime have always used these tactics. Certainly, the use of the Mexican drug cartels is something new, but they have always used proxies. In Iraq, in Lebanon, they have launched terrorist attacks as far away as Buenos Aires. So I wouldn't count out the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps flexing their muscle in a very different way. And I would also note, if you recall, I believe it was about...
We don't know if this was hatched by him or hatched by them with him as the... do you know anything about that part of it?
Well, I can't really get into the details of the investigation.
Okay.
But I would just say that provocative and very dangerous acts like this are not uncommon when it comes to the Iranian...
As I said at the beginning, though, as much as we know that they're capable of provocative, dangerous, and lethal acts of terrorism, this is a head-scratcher, no doubt.
But I would say one other thing about that, and that is, I think at times folks who are writing about this may be giving the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps a little bit too much credit. I read today, they're too good to have made such a bad mistake. Well, any organization can make a mistake, and they have overreached in this respect.
They have indeed. Let's go to Washington, D.C. Caller, your question.
Yes. I wanted to ask why the State Department can't do more to protect and defend human rights and democracy in this protracted so-called Arab Spring, which looks more like a Middle East shooting season, a mess. I mean, why can't, if we had a duty to protect the people in Libya, why not a duty to protect the people in Egypt, where some 3,000 have died and 10,000 in prison and perhaps 100,000 expelled?
Caller, I'm going to stop you there. I thank you for that question, but I want to just turn it around a little bit. Is it not a problem that with America's favorable ratings as low as they are in the region, and with the sort of the disastrous record of the last decade or so, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Abu Ghraib, and the rest, that it limits the ability of the United States to function in the region in any way other than the way that the president is acting right now, which is leading from behind or taking a position of sort of letting others provide sort of the out front leadership in areas where we simply are not in a position to speak out because the credibility of the United States has been impacted.
Well,
would that be a fair assessment?
I would disagree with that. I think that the United States and our policy in the Middle East is exactly where it should be. We are doing something that we have not done in the way that we're doing it right now before, and that is respecting the will and the sovereignty of all of these countries in the Middle East. I mean, take a look at what happened in Cairo. Take a look at what happened in Tunisia. Take a look at what happened in Libya. These were popular uprisings, secular uprisings as well, where we saw people come out and demand change, demand that their leaders either step down or step aside. And so the United States has long advocated for human rights. We're doing so in Syria, which I know you'll be talking about a little later in your show, which is a very complicated issue. But to the caller's point about, well, we provided support for the Libyans. He asked why not about the Egyptians, and I would go one step further. Why not the Syrians? Well,
and why not the Palestinians?
Let me talk about the Syrians as an example. The Syrian opposition has been very clear and almost unanimous that they do not want international support, military international support. They want international observers, for sure. They want the international press to be there to witness what's taking place. So part of this is respecting the will of the people.
I'm going to stop you there because I have a call from Saudi Arabia. I want to get him on the line. Caller, your question. Hello?
Yes?
Yes, your question.
Yes, hello, good evening. First of all, I just want to tell Aaron, mashallah, you have a blessed face.
Shukran jazilan.
My question is, I have three questions. First of all, please be honest, in deep in your heart, what do you think, who's deserve Palestine or Israel, and who's the wrong and who's right? In deep of your heart, you have to be honest. Second, come on, we know that America solved all the problems on the world, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, and they cannot solve a simple problem over 50 years still now as Palestine and Israel. Come on, it's easy, I think. Third, what do you think about Saudi Arabia government assistance and about our King Abdullah? Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Shukran jazilan min Riyadh. Thank you very much for your question. From my heart, and it's what I believe, just as President Obama does, that the Palestinians deserve their own state. There's no disagreement on that point. They should have their own state. It's been far too long, and it is high time for them to have a land of their own. But we also believe that that land should peacefully coexist next to the state of Israel. And that's part of this. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. So that's to the first question. To the second question, can the United States solve this? I have always believed in looking at this problem that the two sides have to want it more than the United States, more than the quartet, more than anybody else. So I wish that we could wave a magic wand and bring peace to the Middle East, but we just can't. The parties are going to be the ones that have to decide that it is in their best interest. The Israelis are going to have to decide that settlements are not productive. The Palestinians are going to have to recognize Israel and know that peacefully coexisting is the way forward.
And the question about King Abdullah?
Well, King Abdullah, what was the question again?
She asked what you thought of him.
Sure. Well, look, he is a visionary leader and has made great strides for the people of Saudi Arabia. We talk a lot about reforms in the Middle East, and King Abdullah is making those reforms. And so,
I would just say on the Palestinian issue that,
sure.
that we are viewed as enablers of Israeli bad behavior. And that I think that therein lies the problem. But I'm going to go to UK for a call right now. Caller? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, your question.
From UK. My question is, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Well, my question is, America and Israel lacks maturity in settling the problem. They don't really have no intention of settling it. America is supporting all bad behavior of Israel, all atrocity committed by, and America is watching and spying. I'm ashamed
There's supposed to be democracy. Same thing. Where is democracy there?
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there because I want to give Aaron, because we have our next guests are coming up.
Sure, sure. Look, again, I reiterate that this is a complicated question, but we are not blindly supporting one side over the other. Of course, we have a very strong partnership with the State of Israel. Israel is a friend and an ally, but we also are friends with the Palestinians. And I want to state very clearly that we have a disagreement about process, about how we get there, but we don't have a disagreement on the end goal, and that end goal is a Palestinian state.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, really
Aaron,
good to be with you.
When we come back, we'll talk to two members of the Syrian National Council about the opposition and about what their vision of the future is. Stay with us. We'll be right back.